Hello everybody, this is Ken Raggio and I thank you for joining me tonight. Here we are on Thursday night, April the 2nd of the year 2020. We're in the second day of a month-long lockdown nationwide because of the COVID virus. And the world is changing. The world is changing. My subject tonight is Trump's invisible enemies. Trump's invisible enemy. It's not COVID-19. It's globalists. Now, I had an early start this morning. Somebody sent me a video very early this morning, and I've been contemplating these things all day. I've had a lot of other things I had to take care of, and I wanted to spend the entire day preparing for this program tonight, and that didn't work out so well. But I've got so much on my mind, it's probably just as well, because I'll probably take up all the time we have anyway with what's already on my mind. But anybody can see that this is a bigger matter than simply a virus. Anybody can see that our nation, the United States of America, is in a great deal of trouble. And Trump has told us on several different press conferences that we are fighting an invisible enemy. And I couldn't agree more. It's not as though it can't be seen with the naked eye, but it is a stealth enemy. It's an enemy that does not like to be exposed for the evil that it really is. And so, without any notes tonight, I'm going to try to wing through this with a whole lot of stuff on my mind. Now, when I wrote the Daniel prophecies, I went chapter by chapter through the book of Daniel, and I tied it together both to all the other prophecies of the Bible that were significant, that were related to it, and to current events. And I've been a student of Bible prophecy very diligently for most of the past 50 years. In 1971, I got this little book called None Dare Call It Conspiracy. None Dare Call It Conspiracy. It's by Gary Allen. It was a runaway bestseller with 5 million in print. And it was basically an expose of the New World Order. This is 50 years ago. I had just got married. I got married in 1972. I think I probably already had this book when I got married. I read this book. I got a massive education in globalism 50 years ago. I had a friend in the ministry who was a very intelligent, in fact, a very brilliant man. His name was Willard Candlon. He traveled the world. He was a missionary with the Assemblies of God. He founded several Bible colleges in Europe, and he was a student of economics. And he lectured before kings and presidents and parliaments on the world economy. And he studied the formation of the Bretton Woods Accords after World War II, the formation of the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Bank for International Settlements, the creation of the Special Drawing Right, the SDR. And basically, Candlon charted out the entire development of the world money system from modern times. And of course, there was quite a bit of teaching in that concerning how the global banking system had its roots from ancient times. It traced all the way back to the Roman Catholic Church and to the Knights Templars, to the vast wealth of the Roman Catholic Church and the Jesuits and the Knights Templars from the first millennium. In the 11 and 1200s, the Catholic Church amassed great wealth by its crusades conducted by the Knights Templars. And when you travel to Europe, you see all the vast, vast cathedrals. If you didn't know it, a cathedral is the headquarters of a bishop of the Roman Catholic Church. So when you see a cathedral, you know that's where one of the Catholic archbishops is headquartered. There are vast cathedrals all over Europe, vast palaces built. Many of them are built by the Knights Templars. And the banking system itself was begun in the 1500s. With the vast wealth of the Roman Catholic Church, a lot of you have heard of the Rothschild family. It was Meyer Amschel Rothschild in 1700s, the late 1700s, who was called upon by the Vatican. Meyer Amschel Rothschild had made a large sum of money buying and selling precious metals and jewels in his day, and he was solicited by the Roman Catholic Church, the Jesuits, to become the guardian. The Rothschild family, not just Rothschild himself, but his 5 sons. They had banks in Frankfurt, London, Paris, and 2 other international banks, 5 banks in all, in Europe. And they became what was called the guardian of the Vatican treasures, the guardians of the Vatican treasures. And so people who are not well studied on this subject have often accused the Rothschilds, who were Jews, of being basically the controllers of the world money system. But the fact was, we would not have heard of the Rothschilds had it not been for their being the custodians or the guardians of the Vatican wealth. So the bottom line of that reality is that from the Rothschild banking system, the first actual banking system in modern times, it was based on the early strategic transactions of the Knights Templars. If you go back to the 1500s and 1600s, the Templars had such great wealth all over Europe that they literally had the ability to set up offices in all the major cities of Europe, and wealthy people, when traveling, whether it was royalty or just great wealthy businessmen, could go to a local office of the Knights Templars and could put their precious valuables on deposit with the Templars, travel across the continent, and when they arrive, let's say they go from London to Rome, or let's say they go from Frankfurt to even Jerusalem, or to Istanbul, or Constantinople, as it was called in old days. By putting their wealth on deposit with the Knights Templars, they would get a written piece of paper, a certificate of deposit, and they could travel without carrying their valuables, because in ancient times and old times, travel was a very dangerous thing. There were many pirates, many roadside bandits and such that would rob travelers blind. They would hold up their horses and their carriages and their stagecoaches and whatever, and they would steal their belongings. And so the wealthy would not travel with their precious belongings, but they would put their money on deposit with the Templars, and then when they arrived at their destination, they would present their certificate of deposit, and they could redeem it then for equal amount of precious metals and jewels. And so that was the earliest form of paper currencies, and that was the certificate of deposits of the Knights Templars. And it was on that primitive banking system that the Rothschilds began to put together a formal banking system, and ultimately it became known as what we now see as the world money system. We see the World Bank operates on top of it, the International Monetary Fund, and most of all, there has come to be, over these past centuries, a global central bank. And there are branch banks all over the world, and they're called national central banks. So that in each country of the world that participates in the global economy, they have central banks that are connected basically as an arm or a daughter work of the central bank, the global bank. And so in 1917, here in the United States of America, Colonel Edwin House who was an operative of the globalists, the world banking system of the Rothschilds and Rockefeller types, succeeded in imposing on this country in 1917 at Jekyll Island, Georgia, what we now know as the Federal Reserve System, or the Federal Reserve Bank. And President Woodrow Wilson signed that into law, I believe it was in 1917. And since that day, the United States of America has been a slave to the global banking system. And if you don't understand the problem with that, I'll put it to you this way. Without the Federal Reserve and without a global central banking system, each nation would, in and of itself, print and circulate its own currency. In fact, when the original colonies were formed, in the 13 colonies of America, they at first were still using the currency of King George of England. But when they declared their independence, along the line of them breaking away and forming the United States of America, they created their own banking system and they've created their own currency. And over the years, there were several attempts by the globalists to come back in there and establish a banking system that was not under the control of the United States of America. One thing that President Andrew Jackson was specifically well known for was his opposition to the Federal Reserve Bank. They tried to bring in this banking system several times in the 1800s and 1900s, and it was temporarily brought into existence, and then it was overthrown by presidents who got wise to it. And here's the problem. When a nation prints its own money, then it owns its own money. It can put its, if let's say the United States prints all of its own money, they put it into circulation. It builds bridges, it builds streets, it builds superstructures, it builds the infrastructure of that nation. It finances industry and does basically anything it wants to do. It finances the employment of its own government employees and so on and so forth. And so by printing its own money, a government is able to put its own money into circulation, and it controls the value of that currency. And for all those the first couple of centuries of this first 150 years or so of this country, the paper currency, the value of the paper currency was directly tied to the price of precious metals like silver and gold. But when the Federal Reserve took over, it gradually moved away from having a precious metals base. Now, I'm old enough to remember, not a whole lot of people will remember this anymore, but when I was a young person, if you took a Federal Reserve piece of currency, a dollar bill, you would see one of the inscriptions across the top of that dollar bill was a silver certificate. And that silver certificate means it was redeemable. If you took, when I was a child, you could go to the bank and present a dollar bill, and they were, by law, they were required to redeem that for silver, a dollar's worth of silver. But I remember in my school days when all of a sudden our paper currency no longer said silver certificate, it said Federal Reserve note. And so the Federal Reserve finally got away from a metal-based economy where the United States was no longer based on the value of gold or silver, and it was based on an arbitrary value that in technical terms is called fiat money, F-I-A-T, fiat money. Fiat money is just paper money. It's worth basically the price of the paper it's printed on, but it is given the value of its owners. And the long and short of it is, and I don't want to go too deep and too far and make this too big of a lecture on that subject, but the fact is, when an agency creates fiat money and puts it into circulation, they do so as a loan. And what that means is for the last 100 years nearly, well, at least 50 years I'll say, this country has been living on fiat money that has absolutely no precious metal value to it, and it is not printed by American printed presses, it's printed by the Federal Reserve. And so what that means is when this country needs money, it goes to the Federal Reserve and borrows that money. Now, under its own banking system, the United States could print its own currency and put its own currency into circulation, and it would owe nobody a penny. But when we go to the Federal Reserve and borrow money, that means every penny that goes into circulation from the Federal Reserve is borrowed money, and we don't only owe that principal in return, we also owe interest on that loan. And so here we are today. Just in the last few days, our government has gone again to the Federal Reserve and borrowed $2.7 trillion. And I think somewhere in that package there was a discussion of not only putting $2.7 trillion cash into the economy, but also to allow another $4 trillion of credit to big industry and to private business to borrow that money under the name of the government in behalf of financial stimulus package. Now, I read a quote here recently. I don't think many people heard it, but Alan Greenspan, who in recent years was one of the long-term presidents of the Federal Reserve, wrote in a book in 1966 explaining how that it was in fact the Federal Reserve that created the Great Depression in 1929 because it flooded the American markets with fiat cash. We call it nowadays stimulus money. Alan Greenspan admitted in 1966 that it was the Federal Reserve that created the Great Depression because it flooded the market with too much cash. He said instead of increasing the value of the dollar, it lowered the value of the dollar, and that's what helped bring about the Great Depression. And just without a great deal of comment on that, I want to tell you that when we go and borrow $1 trillion, we have just created the mechanics of another Great Depression. And it's just beyond belief, because now that we're not even a week into this $2.7 trillion loan, and now I may be mistaken about the point on that. I don't know, it's 2.1 or 2.4, 2.7. I don't remember exactly what the number was, but here we are, less than a week into that $2.something trillion loan from the Federal Reserve, and now our Congress is talking about another stimulus package on the same order, where they spent another $2 trillion on infrastructure such as building bridges and highways and this kind of investments, rebuilding our economy and basically restoring the physical infrastructure of this country and putting so many of our people back to work in the process of that. And so in less than 30 days, it looks like we're going to be going $5 trillion into debt. Now, this book by Gary Allen that I read, I was so deeply moved. I was in 1972. I was 20 years old. I was a young evangelist preaching revivals all over the United States, and I bought cases of this book. I'd hold revivals. In those days, we held church. If we held a revival, it went Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Friday night. And on Friday nights, I typically had a prophecy night. I usually taught prophecies on Friday nights, and on Friday nights I told about how that the book of Revelation chapter 13 spoke of the coming beast government and the mark of the beast and the world money system and a global currency. And this is 50 years ago I was teaching this stuff, guys. So I'm not a novice at this thing by any stretch, but I sold cases and cases of this book, and a lot of people got their eyes opened by it. And Gary Allen exposed the connection between the central bankers of the globe, the Rothschilds. He connected them to the Rockefellers of New York, the Rockefellers to the Chase banks, the J.P. Morgans, the trust companies, the big Wall Street operators, Paul Warburg, the big multi-millionaires. Some of them, John D. Rockefeller was the big oil magnate, Standard Oil fame. His sons, one of them was, of course, everybody's heard of David Rockefeller. He just died I think in the past year or so. One of the wealthiest men of his day. Gary Allen said in his day that it would be the Chase Bank, the Rockefeller banks, that would be a major player in that global system in the end. And surely enough, it was almost ironic. It caught me a little bit blindside. 2005, I attended the United Nations World Summit. It was one of the largest. It was the largest gathering of kings and presidents and prime ministers and such in the history of the world. 153 kings and presidents and such. heads of state. And one of the curious things that I noticed right off the bat, as soon as I got in the building, I had to go through about 4 levels of security. It was one of the highest, well, to this day, it's the highest security I ever went through in my life. And it was because there were so many high-profile people in the building. But the first thing I noticed, one of the first things I noticed, is the only bank terminals in that vast building, in the cafeterias and the offices and such, was ATMs marked by the Chase Bank. And I thought, wow, 2005. And I read Gary Allen said that the Chase Bank would be at the heart of the global money system in the end of time. So here I am 35 years later, and I'm seeing exactly what this guy was talking about. So they connected all of these American bankers, the Rothschilds, Warburgs, J.P. Morgan and such, to London, to Frankfurt, to Paris, and on and on. Gary Allen showed a lot, and he showed a lot of the political people that were involved, people that were bought and paid for by the money system, and he named men like Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon, and he named institutions, universities like Georgetown University and Oxford University that were promoting the globalist state of mind. And he really opened my eyes as a young fella to the imminent threat of a world government and how it was all going to work out. And I began to understand something in those days about how this Bible's Mark of the Beast system would finally come into existence. And now here we are, 50 years later, and the world is in the biggest financial crisis in human history. The gross domestic product of this country stands at about $21 trillion a year. And in one day we're borrowing a month's worth of all the product of this country, including every dollar that's turned over in any way in this country. And in less than a month we'll probably borrow an entire quarter. And that's aside from the fact that we're already, the numbers vary. You hear anywhere from 10 to who knows how many trillions of dollars, 14 trillion, 17 trillion, who knows. So the bottom line is this country is in debt to more loans than the entire country, everything in this country, all the oil and gas, all the electricity, all the automobile industries, all the insurance industries, all the banks and everything, every dime that turns over, all the restaurants, everything you can name, every penny that turns over in this country, we have borrowed an entire year's worth of money, and that's how much we owe. Now, we've reached critical mass because the Bible says the borrower is servant to the lender. And if there ever was a truism, and I'll use another word for servant, and I'll say a slave. The borrower is a slave to the lender. It's easy to look like you've got a lot of money. You can go down to the bank and borrow money, live in a nice house, and drive a nice car. But if you fall on hard times and you can't make the note on that house and the note on that fancy car, then all of a sudden you realize what you really are worth. And sometimes that's a very painful and agonizing and hurtful reality. And I think for a lot of people, literally tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people around the world are going to be feeling that here in the next few months and certainly in the next coming year. I've mentioned just recently in one of my programs how that Tom Fertitta, who is the owner of the big huge Landry's restaurant chain, 550 restaurants, he's worth many billions of dollars. He said, I can probably keep this thing going hopefully to the end of the year with his billions of dollars that he has. But he said, I've laid off over 41,000 of my employees. I furloughed them. They're not getting paid. And he said, I've only got 200 of these well, I've closed 200 of them completely, and the rest of them are just operating with drive-in service, and they're only producing 5% of their ordinary revenue. And he said, if we don't get this thing turned around, he said, even I will end up closing all 550 restaurants, and I will end up broke. That's how bad this thing is. Now, why am I talking about this? And this all is connected to coronavirus, and we can talk about all the backstories on this virus, and we can argue it till the end of the world and probably never come to a real absolute definition of how and why and where this virus got started. But I think it is a fair assumption, and I'm going to make some generalizations here that maybe you'll contest, but I'm just going to say them anyway. I did some of my research of my own, and I found out that now it's already been in the news that the virus came originally from Wuhan, China. And the argument is, did it come from an accidental incident where somebody ate this bat in a marketplace and caught the virus from the bat, or was it biogenetically engineered? Was it created in a laboratory? Is it a bioweapon? Was it, who did that? We've had a Harvard University professor that's been indicted for his role in that. He was caught transporting biological materials from Harvard University to China. There's been other men that have been caught by the FBI. I think there's been about 5 Chinese involved in this. They've been caught moving controlled biological materials, patented laboratory materials from the United States to China. We have at least enough reason to suspect, we have plenty of reason to suspect that there's foul play in this entire scenario. And then what I found through my own research is that there is indeed a laboratory in Wuhan, China, that is a level 4, I think is what they call it. It's a very high level, dangerous laboratory where they deal in biological material that is very deadly, like what we're dealing with. And much of it is created. They study bioweapons. It's a very dangerous laboratory. And the fact is that George Soros, the Hungarian socialist, an enemy of the United States of America, the benefactor of Media Matters, which opposes the conservative media, the benefactor of Antifa, which is and the Black Lives Matters, and a lot of the rioting and carrying on and rebellion that's going on in this country is being financed by George Soros. A lot of the extremist, liberal, socialist, communist politics and politicians are being financed by George Soros. George Soros is really an enemy of the state, and the records show that George Soros had a large stake in the Wuhan laboratory. Not only that, but there's another laboratory also in Wuhan, China, that works on a similar scale and similar studies, and it deals in antidotes, that is vaccines for these viruses. And lo and behold, George Soros and Bill Gates are major stockholders in that lab in Wuhan, China. And so we can see the fingerprints of the globalists. George Soros, of course, is a globalist. Bill Gates of Microsoft, formerly of Microsoft, he just quit last week. Berkshire Hathaway, big finance company, he quit that as well, and he is now giving himself to this globalist agenda. And there's so many backstories to this, I could talk all night long, and biggest part of you wouldn't have any clue what I'm talking about, so I won't go there. But Bill Gates is not to be trusted. He is a globalist. And so this morning I was given a video to watch, a link, somebody sent me a link, a friend of mine sent me a link to this website of the World Economic Forum. And this World Economic Forum, I'm not sure exactly how to best describe it. It is a global organization that is I will go ahead and say that I believe that the World Economic Forum is the premier globalism think tank in all the world. Now, when I say the premier globalism think tank, I'm thinking at the same time of all the other globalist think tanks that are already well established. Some of you have heard of the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, the Council on or the CFR. Gary Allen mentioned the CFR way back in his days. We had men like Alan Dulles. The Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. is named after him. He was a globalist at heart. The Council on Foreign Relations was a bunch of globalists that were engaged in politics, trying to institute globalist agendas in the American government. In Britain, there was a similar organization called the Royal Institute for International Affairs, or RIIA, the RIA, the Royal Institute for International Affairs. And in many of the major nations of the world, there are similar think tanks. And then you have independent think tanks that are not so directly connected to government and politicians, things like the Brookings Institute in New York and the Aspen Institute in Colorado. There's a whole lot of organizations like that around the world. And these globalist meet, some of you have heard of the Bilderbergers. This is a group that meets in the Netherlands. It began in the city of Bilderberg, Netherlands, back in the 50s. And that's where the movers and shakers of the world, the billionaires and the powerful men and women of the globe, meet annually at the Bilderberger meetings, and they are working fast and furiously on a globalist agenda. And one of the famous premises of the globalists is a borrowed quote from Winston Churchill. Of course, Churchill certainly made this quote famous, but in later times, a man named Saul Alinsky, who was a radical revolutionary, a communist, a friend of Che Rivera, and a preacher of socialism, communism, and a mentor to Hillary Clinton, and a mentor to Barry Soetoro, a.k.a. Barack Obama. And that statement of Winston Churchill that was used so often by Saul Alinsky, and then in most recent times by Barack Obama's, I think he was a chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, who became the mayor of Chicago. Rahm Emanuel said, infamously said, never let a crisis go to waste. Churchill said, never let a crisis go to waste. Alinsky said, never let a crisis go to waste. Rahm Emanuel said, never let a crisis go to waste. And behind that statement, now, you have to know, Churchill did not have the same motivations in his saying what he said. I think it would be safe to say that when Churchill said, never let a crisis go to waste, he was thinking about using his opportunity to further a good cause. But in the case of these socialist communists, it was meant to take advantage of every crisis to put forward their socialist, globalist agenda. And so that ties to Bible prophecies, because the Bible said in Revelation chapter 13 that in the last days, John said in his prophetic writings, he said, I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. On his horns 10 crowns, upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. His feet were as the feet of a bear. His mouth is the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power and his seat and his great authority. And I'm going to quickly interpret that. The 4 heads of the leopard is the Franco-German empire that we now know as the European Union. The 4 heads of the leopard are the 4 Reichs of Germany. The first Reich being the Holy Roman Empire, the second Reich being the German Empire under Otto von Bismarck and Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, Bismarck and Wilhelm. And the Third Reich was began when Adolf Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany in 1933 and created what we came to know as the Nazi Party and the Nazi Empire of Germany. That's the third head, and that's the head that John in verse 3 said, I saw one of the heads as it were wounded to death. His deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. So the deadly wound was on the third head, the Third Reich of Germany, and that was Hitler's empire. And the reason it was deadly wound is because Germany was divided. And another prophecy from the 7th chapter of Daniel, he saw a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth, and it laid on one side, and the 3 ribs said to the bear, Arise and devour much flesh. And that was fulfilled at about the same time as the deadly wound. The deadly wound prophecy and the 3 rib prophecy is actually essentially the same event, because it was the 3 ribs of the 3 superpowers of the world. The 3 superpowers of World War II was United States, Britain, and Russia. Those were the allies against Adolf Hitler. And so it was the 3 ribs of those great superpowers, Franklin Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin, that met in the south of Russia, on one side of Russia, on the western side of Russia. I believe that's the Black Sea, if I'm not mistaken. The Yalta is there on the Black Sea. It was a resort, the famous resort area, and they met there at the Yalta. And it was there that the 3 ribs decided that as a reward for Russia assisting the Allies in defeating Adolf Hitler, they would allow Russia to claim all the Eastern Bloc nations and take Eastern Germany as a prize and Eastern Berlin. So the 3 ribs said to the bear, Arise and devour much flesh. And that's what the bear did. Russia devoured much flesh at the end of the Yalta Conference. And it was the same thing as all these other prophecies. So the head being wounded to death. John seeing the head being wounded to death, and the 3 ribs saying, Arise, devour much flesh. That's when the head was wounded. It was the word of the 3 ribs that wounded the head. Bible prophecies are absolutely amazing. They never cease to just stun me with their accuracy. But then he said, but the deadly wound was healed, and that happened. Nobody ever thought that Germany would ever be reunited. They did that to make sure that we would never see another Nazi empire. They divided Germany and divided Berlin just to make sure we would never see another rise of another one like Adolf Hitler. But years later, 1989, President Ronald Reagan of the United States went to the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin and stood there at the wall and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear this wall down. And so the head of the Soviet Union came months later and tore down that wall, and Eastern Berlin was united, and East and West Germany was reunited, and the deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who's like unto the beast, who was able to make war with him? And there was given him in the mouth, speaking great things. Now the 7 heads, I want you to understand who the 7 heads of this end time world government are. He said it had the mouth of a lion, that is the British lion, had the feet of a bear, that's Russia, and had the 4 heads of the leopard, that's 6 heads. You got that? 1 head is the British head. Another head is the Russian head. 4 heads is the European Union's heads, the 4 Reichs. And the 7th head is that dreadful beast, which is a world government in the end of times. Now, we see the early stages of that end time beast in the form of the United Nations right now. Now, let me go back to this statement about never let a crisis go to waste. You see, these globalists created, some of you have heard this, some of you may not. It is one of the policies of the globalists, and this dates back, oh my goodness, I could teach for hours on this, and I'd really lose some of you, and I don't want to do that. It dates back to the Jesuits of the Roman Catholic Church. The Jesuits were founded in 1505 by Loyola, Ignatius de Loyola, who became the first Secretary General of the Society of Jesus, or we know them as the Jesuits. And one of their policies was called casuistry. Now, it's kind of a funny thing. I just taught recently on this same item in the religion of Islam. Islam has a policy in its religion called taqiyya, T-A-Q-I-Y-Y-A. Taqiyya is an Islamic teaching that it's good to lie when necessary to protect Islam, or it's good to lie when it furthers the cause of Islam. And that's a similar doctrine in the Catholic Church, in the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits. It's called casuistry. The Jesuits are taught that it's suitable. In fact, in the Jesuit oath, and I've got a copy of that in the Daniel Prophecies, in the Jesuit oath that these men take when they first join the Jesuits, there is in fact a statement that it's better to use the sword or the knife or poison or any other thing to take down enemies of the Roman Catholic Church than it is to let them survive. There's a justification for murder, for intrigue, for every kind of diabolical subversion in the name of the Catholic Church. And one of those things is casuistry, means deception, or it's akin to lying. Casuistry, and for 500 years the Jesuits have been known around the world. In fact, if you look up the word Jesuit in the dictionary, one of the meanings of a Jesuit is a liar or a deceiver. And so they use deception, they use casuistry, they use subversion to get their way. And one of the ways they do that is to create crises and act on those crises. Let me read this to you. I hope I got the I think I just lost my bookmark on that. Some of you have heard of the Latin phrase ordo ab K-O-C-H-A-O, order, ordo, O-R-D-O, ordo, ab, A-B, K-O-C-H-A-O. And it's the Latin phrase for order out of chaos. In the Jesuit Sermon of Induction, that's revealed in the Engineer Corps of Hell by Edwin A. Sherman in 1883, page 124, he gives us this quote from the Society of Jesus Pledge, and it's also published in another book called The Subterranean Rome by Carlos Diddler, written in 1843, and it's also recorded in the Library of Congress, catalog card number 66-43354, and it says, I'm just pulling out a statement out of it, "It is just to exterminate or annihilate impious or heretical kings, governments, or rulers." The superior says to the charged, the man that's about to be inducted into the Jesuits, the superior says to him, "My son, heretofore you have been taught to act as a dissembler among Roman Catholics, to be a Roman Catholic, to be a spy even among your own brethren, to believe no man, to trust no man. Among the reformers, be a reformer. Among the Huguenots, be a Huguenot. Among Calvinists, be a Calvinist. Among Protestants, generally to be a Protestant, and obtain their confidence, to seek even to preach from their pulpits, and to denounce with all the vehemence of your nature our holy religion and Pope, and even to descend so low as to become a Jew among the Jews, that you might be enabled to gather together all information for the benefit of your order as a faithful soldier of your Pope." That is, to be all things to all men for the benefit of the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church. Now, let me get back to this order out of chaos, and never let a crisis go to waste. It's from chaos that a restructuring takes place. If you didn't know it, the First World War was triggered by the assassination by Archduke Ferdinand of Austria. And it was the assassination of a royalty that precipitated World War I. And millions of lives were lost in that war. And that chaos, that casuistry, that murdering a king to get your way, produced, as it were, at the conclusion of World War I, what came to be known as the League of Nations. The League of Nations. The League of Nations was the first modern world government. It was based in Geneva, Switzerland. A vast, vast structure was built called the Palace of Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. And that's where the League of Nations was. And that's where it was the precursor to what we now know as the United Nations. But the problem with the League of Nations is that several of the nations of the world did not sign on to it. They didn't agree with it. They didn't support it. They didn't pledge to it. And the big problem was the United States. Thank God there were men in the United States in those days who saw through the deception. Thankfully, in those days, I wish I could time travel back to those days and live in a better day than what we're living in now, but I know we're here to stay. We're here. This is our day. But the American Congress would not ratify the League of Nations, and so after it operated for a few years, it finally collapsed, and the first world government effectively went out of business. It didn't totally go out of business. It went on minimum operational standards, I guess you could say. And so they needed another crisis. And so we had the sinking of the Bismarck, and we had World War II on our hands. And World War II killed tens of millions of innocent men. And there was Adolf Hitler. There were the pogroms of the Ukraine and Poland, Germany, all that part of the world. Millions and millions of people died. Russia, the entire city of Leningrad was destroyed by the Germans, and just so many tragedies. The scorched earth policy, which actually became the first trumpet of the 7 trumpets in Bible prophecy. The scorched earth policy, where Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin destroyed basically all the Ukraine. About 2 million people died in one battle. They burnt almost the whole Ukraine to the ground. 28,000 cities were destroyed. Universities and colleges and public schools and factories were burned to the ground, destroyed. The people were pillaged and plundered and murdered. The greatest war. The history books say that the scorched earth policy that was carried out between Joseph Stalin of Russia and Adolf Hitler of Germany was the worst battle in the worst war in the history of the world. And in prophetic terms, it was the first trumpet. And I think that was 1944. So, it was the chaos. It was the crisis. Never let a crisis go to waste. And at the end of World War II, 1945, the United Nations was born in New York, and John D. Rockefeller donated the property we now know as the headquarters of the United Nations building. Many of you have been in that building. You've passed by and seen it on the streets of New York there by the Hudson River. But not only was the United Nations born, but the Bretton Woods Accord took place in those days, and the International Monetary Fund was born, and the World Bank, the world banking system was born, and the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland was born, and the special drawing rights, which was the world's first paperless currency, the first digital currency was born. And that was 1945. That's 75 years ago. And in 1948, the state of Israel was born. And Jesus said, when you see that fig tree putting forth leaves, you know summer is nigh. Likewise, when you see all these things begin to come to pass, know that this generation will not pass until all these things be fulfilled. And it's been 72 years now. And a generation runs from 70 to 80 years since all these big prophecies. The Second World War, the birth of the United Nations, the birth of the World Banking, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Federal Reserve systems all over the world, all this came into existence. And it was all intended to bring us into global governance. Global governance. Say that statement. Okay, so where do we stand? I want to show you a website. This is a website called the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum is in Geneva, Switzerland, which is the same city as the United Nations headquarters there in the Palace of Nations. In fact, what I said about the League of Nations was resurrected in the same building as the United Nations. And now you go there and it's one of the largest buildings anywhere in the world. It's got, they say that around 28,000 international conferences are held in that building every single year. There's more global business goes on in Geneva than goes on in New York City. And I've often speculated, for over 20 years I've speculated that because of the prophecies of Revelation 13, and because I know the beast of that last day and that seventh head is going to be in Europe, I've speculated that sooner or later we're going to see the United Nations shift its power, if not altogether close down the New York offices and move in completely to Geneva for its world headquarters. And so it strikes me as very suspicious that this World Economic Forum is also in Geneva, but that's only the start of it, because it's the World Economic Forum, which is the, as I said earlier, probably the premier globalist think tank in the world. This is where men like Bill Gates and George Soros and kings and presidents and prime ministers and wealthy businessmen, this is where the Rockefellers and Warburgs, and this is where the billionaires, and I don't know if there's any trillionaires. Probably after this, Amazon, Jeff Bezos might end up being a trillionaire. I don't know. These guys, listen carefully, these guys have been working on a globalist agenda for decades. And they have got every teeny tiny step planned out. I want you to see, you see this right here? You see this circle? I want you to look around here, right here. Now the page I'm on right now is called COVID-19, a global issue. It says COVID-19, which was first detected in China late 2019, has since been declared a pandemic, threatens to become one of the most difficult tests faced by humanity in modern history. Now I want to bring to your mind, this website is extremely intense. I dare to say there are thousands of pages on this website, if not many thousands of pages, and they're on every subject that has to do with global governance. Now it's got a paywall to it, or you got to at least sign in and get access, and I'm not willing to do that. I don't want to give them my name or my address, so I can't show you the whole page. But you see this page on global governance, and this opening article is written by the Blavatnik School of Government from the University of Oxford. And this opening statement about global governance is being presented by the University of Oxford. Now, I'll go back to my old book, Gary Allen's book, None Dare Call It Conspiracy, and he told how that Oxford University was in the 1970s, and decades earlier, was the seat of socialism and globalism. There was a man who died in the early 1900s. I think he died in 1902. His name was Cecil Rhodes. He died at the age of 48, but he died one of the wealthiest men on earth because he'd gone down in his young business years and struck it rich in Africa in the diamond mines. He was a wealthy, wealthy, wealthy diamond magnate. But he had a lot of health issues. He had asthma and some other problems. And so when Cecil Rhodes died, he was of course a subject of the British Empire, and he ran with the movers and shakers of old Britain back in the early 1900s. And he was a socialist. He ran with guys like George Bernard Shaw, who was one of the first real socialists in Britain at the turn of the 20th century. And George Bernard Shaw articulated a lot of the planks of socialism that had been written in Karl Marx's manifesto and written by Lenin and some of the other early Marxist communists. And Bernard Shaw and Cecil Rhodes had a vision for a global socialist communist world government. And when Cecil Rhodes died, he endowed Oxford University with vast millions of dollars to further the cause of globalism and socialism. And so we have seen in those more than 100 years since that day how that Oxford University has been a training ground, a breeding ground for globalists. And the Rhodes Scholarship is one of the most coveted scholarships in all the world. I'm taking you to Wikipedia here. The Rhodes Scholarship is an international postgraduate award for students to study at the University of Oxford, established in 1902, founded by English businessman politician Cecil John Rhodes. Now, I want to go to a list. Let me look up on Wikipedia here, list of Rhodes scholars. And I want you to look at this list. Now this list goes all the way back to 1903, and I'm just going to scroll through it and start way back in. These people graduated here. Right in this area, they were graduating back in 1947. I think Dooley's is in this list. There's Richard Lugar, who graduated in 54. He was a member of the Aspen Strategy member. I'm looking right here in the middle of the page. He was a Republican senator from Indiana. In fact, I think Brother Nathaniel Urshan was a personal acquaintance of Richard Lugar. Probably some of our modern preachers up there have met him at some time or the other. But these guys have been trained in globalism. I think Lugar's dead now, but everybody knows who Bill Clinton is. Bill Clinton was an Oxford graduate, and he's been well rehearsed in globalism. And James R. Woolsey here graduated in 63. He was the head of the Central Intelligence Agency from 1993 to 1995. He was a core member of the Project for the New American Century. We've got Wesley Clark, graduated in 66, Supreme Allied Commander of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. I'm trying to look up the key list of these graduates of the Rhodes Scholars. Listen to this list. I'll tell you know who one of them was? Rachel Maddow. Would you believe Rachel Maddow was a graduate of the Rhodes Scholarship? A globalist. Oxford professor John Ruskin, back in the early days, articulated some of the early arguments for socialism. There's Bill Clinton right there, graduated in 68. He also went to Georgetown University. Now, Georgetown University is a Jesuit college. Georgetown University is a Jesuit Roman Catholic run college, and it is the premier college for international diplomacy. If you have a desire to be involved in any kind of international diplomacy, chances are you're going to end up going to Georgetown University, because that's where all the movers and shakers in the world are trained, and they're trained by Jesuits of the Roman Catholic Church. Listen to this list. Bill Clinton, President of the United States, and also, listen carefully, the head of the Clinton Global Initiative. Now, we've been hearing, those of you who pay attention, you've been hearing how that the Clinton Foundation has been shown to be as corrupt as the day is long, and that they funneled hundreds of millions of dollars through their Clinton Foundation. And I really got an early heads up on these people when I was at the United Nations in 2005, because that year, the same year 153 kings and presidents came to New York, was the year that Bill Clinton launched the Clinton Global Initiative right a few blocks down the street from me, and it was notable. I spent that whole week from Monday through about Thursday night or Friday. I was there at that conference at that United Nations General Assembly, and at the same time, all these heads of state were having meetings in and out of the United Nations building. They were also going down the street to meet with Bill and Hillary Clinton, and they were talking about globalism. And you had people like Kissinger and Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey and Bon Jovi and all of these globalists. In fact, I saw Bon Jovi there in a press conference there, and I saw Tony Blair. He's a big globalist. In fact, Gordon Brown, one of the former prime ministers of Britain, said in this week's news, it's time for us to establish a global government. All these people are Oxford-trained people, and they come from Georgetown. Globalism is a Jesuit invention. Globalism is a Jesuit construct. Now, there's been many despots and kings over the earth that wanted to rule the world. Alexander the Great back in ancient times wanted to rule the world, but he failed to do that. But men have never failed to lose that lust, desire to have power and money over the world. And the biggest name in despotism in all the world is the Jesuits of the Roman Catholic Church. I better look at my timeline, make sure I haven't been cut off yet, because some of the things I'm saying I may get cut off for doing. And I know I've kept y'all a long time, but I'm gonna wrap this up here pretty quick. Now, I wanted to read you that list of other graduates of Oxford. Hold on a second. King Abdullah of Jordan, Crown Prince of Greece, Crown Prince of Denmark, Prince Philippos of Greece and Denmark, Prince Bernard of the Dutch royal family, Prince Guillaume of Luxembourg, Prince Philippe of Spain, Prince of the House of Saud, Prince Naif al Saud of the Saudi royal family, Prince Muhammad of Jordan, Don Augustine Iturbide of the Habsburg descendants, the President of Panama, the President of the Philippines, the President of the European Commission, the President of Costa Rica, Bill Clinton, President of the United States, President of El Salvador, President of Ecuador. These are the people that come from the Georgetown University alumni, and they're trained by Jesuits. Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, Greta Van Susteren, Chris Matthews, Newt Gingrich, George Barna, the pollster, William Bennett, former Secretary of Education, Jerry Brown, former Governor of California, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who groomed Barack Obama, Pat Buchanan, William F. Buckley, Fidel Castro, William Casey, Hillary Clinton, Andrew Cuomo, Governor of New York. I mean, These are globalists, guys. If you want to know why they're doing so many stupid things that are bad for their country, I'm telling you why. They're doing it because they're globalists, and they want to take this thing down. Oh, I could go all night long, guys. Catholics, Jesuits, globalists, Oxford Rhodes Scholars, CFR, Royal Institute, Aspen Institute, Bilderbergers, Brookings Institute, World Economic Forum, United Nations, all the NGOs, all the non-governmental organizations in the United Nations, all of these guys, they're all globalists. They all want to take away our sovereignty. They want to destroy our economy. And now let me try to put a cap on all this. The plan is to take down the United States of America. And I cannot say it strong enough. The globalists want to destroy our national sovereignty. There's no kinder or softer way to tell the fact. These people want to destroy the United States of America. They believe with all their heart that it's bad to have nationalism and patriotism. They want globalism. And so that brings me back to this World Economic Forum. These guys had a plan for this COVID virus long before the COVID virus ever struck. My speculation, and I don't have all the facts to prove what I'm saying, but I think some of you probably see what I see. My speculation is sooner or later there was going to be, now there's 2 or 3 things I never mentioned. One of them is in Agenda 21, the Rio de Janeiro conference back in the 90s, I guess it was. All of these are globalists. They got things like socialism, climate change, the green agenda, carbon taxes, population control, biometric identification. This is the world agenda. Back in the 1980s, I was in Houston at a Fiesta Market. It was a big, huge, one of the biggest grocery stores in Houston those days. And they had a clearance shelf, a big table that had hundreds of clearance books for sale. And I was just sitting there while my wife was shopping groceries, and I was browsing through those books, and I come across this book called Rio, R-I-O, Reshaping International Order. Reshaping International Order. And it was written by one named Tannenberg, who was I think a Pulitzer Prize or Nobel Prize winner. And it was the outline for globalism, and it was an active document. This was not theories. This was the agenda that the globalists were following back in those days. And I'm telling you, they've been following those agendas to this minute. Agenda 21, you heard of just back in October of last year. They had this Event 201 in New York. Bill Gates and all of his globalist pals, they conducted a pseudo-virus pandemic, and everything that they practiced in New York, they even had all the newscasts simulated. They had fake newscasters, they had fake news broadcasts, and they were all talking about how bad it was going globally. They literally acted out this entire global virus pandemic months before it ever started. And it's impossible not to suspect. It's impossible to know these things and not suspect that they did this on purpose. This is never let a crisis go to waste. This is order out of chaos. They brought this pandemic, and it could have been Wuhan, it could have been Shanghai, it could have been Peking, Beijing, it could have been Delhi, India, it could have been anywhere. They could have sent this deadly virus into the world at any point in time, at any place in time. It wouldn't make a difference, because the agenda is the same thing. Kill as many people as you can to bring down the global economy so that there is no national remedy, that no one nation is able to save the economy. Now, I'm going to just go ahead and say, if anybody can help it, then Donald Trump can do it, because he's a smart guy. I got a lot of confidence in his abilities. But I know one thing, he's got to be absolutely and utterly exhausted right now. They're wearing him slap out. And they're waiting. And Bill Gates says we've got vaccines in the makings. And everybody who studied these vaccines says they have biometric identifiers in them. And they want to introduce them in places like Bangladesh and down in the deep of third world countries in Africa where people don't have enough technical knowledge, enough common sense, enough wisdom to realize they're being taken advantage of. And they want to practice these biometric identifying vaccines on these unsuspecting people, and they want to and then I saw a video just before I come on the air here tonight where Bill Gates is saying we want to get to the place where you will either have to have proof that you've been vaccinated or proof that you have actually survived the virus to be able to travel. He's saying we're going to get to the place where you will not be able to get on a public transportation, including an airplane, if you don't have the vaccination or have proof that you have survived the virus. Friends, that's global government. You say, well, is that the mark of the beast? No, that is not directly the mark of the beast. And here's why. Because the mark of the beast comes in the middle of the last 7 years. And I started there in the 13th chapter of Revelation. I've got to hurry because I've been with you an hour and 10 minutes. I'm gonna rush through this and try to wrap it up. 13th chapter of Revelation. The Bible says he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. It was given unto him to make war with the saints. Now we've seen in the very most purportedly innocuous terms, they've asked our churches not to meet. The governor of Texas said we're not going to make a law against them meeting, but we're going to ask them to voluntarily not meet. Other states have made it illegal, and some states have said we. In fact, up in New York, they said if these churches meet, we'll shut them down permanently. I think that was de Blasio said that. If the churches don't quit meeting, then we'll shut them down permanently. And that's getting on the verge. The Bible says it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Now, I don't see this as a political shutdown. I think this is truly based on the virus itself. But the day will come when you will not be able to have church because of ideological reasons, like in communist China right now. If you want to know what the world is headed, where the world is headed, just look at communist China. And I want to tell you something. If extreme governmental controls was the future of the world, if there was hope for the world in extreme radical human control, then China should be one of the most wonderful places on this planet to live. But instead, it's a hellhole. It's a nightmare. They said that 21 million cell phone accounts have been canceled just recently in the last month or two. And the only way and the only reason those 21 million phones could have been canceled is because somebody must have died. Because it is a legal requirement for you to have a cell phone in China. You do all your self-identifying and all your transactions, all your economy is based on your possession of a cell phone. So if you don't have a cell phone, you must be dead. But look at what a horrible place China is, with total governmental control, and that's the way they want the whole world to be. And they have this depopulation agenda. They want to bring the population of the world down from 7 or 8 billion to 500 million. It was given unto him to make war with the saints, to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations, and all them that dwell on the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with a sword must be killed with a sword. Here's the patience and faith of the saints. And I'm just going to tell you before I quit, God's going to get even with these guys no matter what the world suffers at their hands. Jesus is coming back in the end of this thing, and he's going to destroy every one of these people. And I beheld another beast, John said, coming up out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb. He spoke like a dragon. This is the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. He looks like a lamb, but he speaks like the devil. And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him. The truth of it is the power of the European Union, the power of that world government system that's being born there in Geneva, is from Rome. Rome spawned all that. Rome bred all that through its Jesuitry for the last 5 centuries. For the last 1,700 years, in fact. He had 2 horns like a lamb. He spoke like a dragon. He exercised all the power of the first beast before him. And he caused the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast. It's Rome that makes us worship that global system. And he does great wonders so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth and the side of men. We're going to see demonic power manifest in the Roman Catholic Church like the world's never seen. And he deceives them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had the power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. If you don't comply with this new global government, it's going to be ordered to kill you. And he calls us all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark on their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man may buy or sell save he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Herein is wisdom. Let him that has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now, that's going to happen in the middle of those 7 years. The next chapter talks about he saw the 144,000. The 7th chapter told us that this 144,000 will be sealed right before the 4 horsemen march and that 6th trumpet war. There's 42 months that begins. When this mark of the beast comes, there's 42 months left until Jesus comes to fight the battle of Armageddon. I want you to understand clearly. Listen to me carefully. This vaccine, either it will not come right now or it's not the mark of the beast, because the mark of the beast is going to be issued in the middle of that week. And the Bible said in the 14th chapter, verse 9, it said, the third angel followed him, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast in his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, which is the image of Mary. That is the premier image of the Roman Catholic Church and the Jesuits. Every nation nearly in the world's got Roman Catholic Church with images of Mary in them. The smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever. They have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, write, blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. Yea, saith the Lord, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. Now, at the end of that 42 months, and that verse goes on and talks about the rapture. The rapture is in the 28th, 9th, 30th verses of Matthew 24, and it's after the tribulation of those days. Jesus said, after the tribulation of those days, then shall appear the sign of the coming of the Son of Man in heaven. Then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn. Then shall they see, then shall he send his angels and gather up his elect from the four winds of the heaven, when at the sound of a great trumpet. So the last trumpet sounds at the end of the 42 months of the 7 years. So at the very end of the 7 years, the trumpet's going to sound. Jesus is going to come. The dead in Christ are going to rise. We which are alive and remain will be caught in the air. We're going to go up in white robes with immortal bodies. We're going to go to Jerusalem. Jesus is going to fight the battle of Armageddon. We're going to see the victory there. The beast and the false prophet are going to be destroyed, and we're going to live and rule and reign with Jesus Christ for 1,000 years of peace. Now, don't take the mark. There's just some very, very simple conclusions, and I'm through. First of all, don't take anything. If they come to prick anything in your hand or in your forehead, say no. I may be wrong, but I don't think that a vaccine with a biometric cell in it, I mean, if that's all in your cellular structure, I don't see where that's a prick in your hand or your forehead, because the Bible says specifically that it's in your right hand. So if they put it in your left hand, that's not the same thing. If they don't put it in your forehead, or if it's not in either your hand or your forehead, then that's not the mark of the beast, because that wouldn't fulfill that prophecy. So don't do anything that fits that particular prophecy. And it's not going to come till 42 months before Jesus returns. So we're 7 years away at the very least to the coming of the Lord, because that's 7 years of Daniel's prophecy, and that begins when the Pope confirms a covenant with many. And I just talked about this on a recent video, how that the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church has scheduled this October 2020 to bring all those powers of the world together, the religious leaders, the political leaders, economic leaders, to sign a new document for a new global way of thinking. Basically, the Pope is introducing a brand new global religion that has nothing to do with the gospel of Jesus Christ, and he wants all these people to sign this document in October of 2020. October 15, 2020. I suspect that might be the confirmation. But like the mark, there's a date on it. It has to have a 7-year date on it. The Bible said he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. That is 7 prophetic years. So if that does not have the appearance of a 7-year covenant, then that's not the covenant we're looking for. But it might be. It has a strong smell of being that confirmation. Folks, we're in the last days. Okay, I'm going to quit. We're in the last days. Get right with God. Go to church when the doors are open again.
Thank you for watching. Please like and share and follow me on Facebook.
You're going to be
Twitter,
locked down till the end of April.
Cloud Hub,
Spend some time alone with God. Go find a quiet place and pray and seek God. Search your
Visit
heart.
my website at KenRaggio.com for thousands of pages of Bible articles on every subject. Subscribe to receive my daily Bible studies by email. Go to Amazon, search for books by Ken Raggio. You'll see my daily Bible companion, 5,000 lessons almost from every chapter of the Bible, 2-volume set, Old and New Testaments. Get the Daniel prophecies, God's plan for the last days, 726 pages with footnotes, 175 photos, one of the most powerful prophecy teachings anywhere. Get the greatest doctrines of the Bible. Get praying on purpose, praying for results, how men prevail with God. Get Long Winding Road, my very personal story, and Treasures of Darkness, how to see the glory of God in your darkest trials. Click the link below if you want all 9 books for only $125 here in the United States only. And please donate through the link below, and then share these videos with your friends, and I'll see you next time. Good night.